The Metal Gear series is full of villains and antagonists of varying qualities, severities, and motivations, each of them taking up their own different ideologies and philosophies, and each of them willing to put their lives on the line to see their plans fulfilled. And this earnest devotion to their morals allows the best of them to be seen as sympathetic or misguided in a way, but also their unshakable determination is what sheds light on the real monsters of the world. The rats who parasite off those with big ideas, and the biggest rat of them all was built up since Sons of Liberty, this being the backboneless, brittle bastard building breakthrough bomb-equipped bipedal bots, Huey Emmerich. Huey Emmerich is a reoccurring character throughout the whole of the Metal Gear Solid series, appearing most prominently in the big boss-focused sections of the series itself, seemingly intentionally designed to be one of the most despicable people in the whole of Metal Gear. From the subtle things we see in Peace Walker to the mountains of evidence against him in the Phantom Pain, Huey was always going to be someone who fell hard due to the time he spent with Big Boss, especially since his very introduction to the series was being part of a traumatic backstory for Emma Emmerich, and when Kojima expanded on that in the Metal Gear Solid 4 database, Huey became one of the most pathetic characters in the whole franchise. And the more you unravel Huey's backstory and history, the more you see how much of an awful person he always was. Though before we get into that, we should understand the meaning behind his name and design. Starting first with his design. Huey is clearly taking direct inspiration from his son Hal's design, with the key difference being that he is in a wheelchair, likely done in a way to make Huey appear more pitiable or sympathetic so you don't immediately question his actions in Peace Walker, but beyond that, his wheelchair also plays a key role in his motivation throughout the whole of the series. It's even the origin of his name, because, interestingly enough, while he is often referred to as Huey by the people in-game, his first name isn't actually Huey. Huey is a nickname given to him by his colleague and romantic interest, Dr. Strangelove, during their time working together at NASA. She gave him this name as a reference to his disability, as it was a direct reference to the bipedal disabled service robot in the movie Silent Running, which came in a trio all named after Donald Duck's relatives, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. Along with this, his name is also a double reference since the director of Silent Running, Douglas Trumbull, was one of the people who worked on the special effects in 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is a movie that Otacon would get his name Hal from, which is in fact called into attention in-universe as well. And speaking of movie references, his last name Emmerich is also a direct reference to one of Hideo Kojima's favorite directors, Roland Emmerich, best known for his disaster movies like Independence Day and The Day After Tomorrow, which were movies that became famous for their impressive special effects work. But I feel their status as disaster movies are the reason that the Emmerich family is so connected to weapons of mass destruction, as each family member was involved in some sort of destructive weapons project in one way or another, from Huey's father being part of the Manhattan Project to his son Otacon creating Metal Gear Rex. But Huey was a little bit of an overachiever. He went above and beyond when it came to world-destroying weapons, being a part of multiple nuclear weapons programs. He seemed like he was born to be a weapons manufacturer, so much so that the day he actually came into this world was the same day his father's research was put into action over Hiroshima. That date being August 6th, 1945. Though due to his father's constant contact with radiation due to his research, Huey would be born with a bit of an abnormality, his spine being wrongly shaped, resulting in him being paraplegic from birth. And while later in life he would come to blame his father for his disability, costing him a normal life, Huey originally idolized his father's work as a global good, since the bombings did save lives in the long run by ending the war as quickly as possible. It was a deterrence of sorts used by the United States, an idea that Huey would quickly become attached to and obsessed with, but ultimately, he would come to view the research itself as terrible when he saw the destruction that it actually caused at those locations. Huey's relationship with his father actually ends up being sort of a microcosm on how he handles conflicts later on in the series, starting with idolizing someone, then finding any reason to blame them for his problems, so that he can paint himself wholly as innocent in the end. But funny enough, it was his disability that led him down the path that he would end up, this being bipedal weapons research, which in turn led him to meeting the man who would change his life forever.
Alexander Leonovich Granin. A man of some importance, if I do say so myself.
a Soviet scientist who was way ahead of his time, and the original designer of the bipedal tank known as Metal Gear. The two would become fast friends, and Granin, when he found his research being brought to a standstill, wanted to ship off Metal Gear's design documents to Huey in America, though Volgin would end Granin before he got a chance, leaving these plans to be lost for roughly 8 years, until Station Chief of the CIA, Hot Coldman, would get his hands on these documents using his contacts within the agency. Viewing them as the perfect tools for his plan, he would reach out to Granin's closest companion, Huey Emmerich, to create some AI weapons for him, which Huey would happily comply under the guise that he was creating tools for nuclear deterrence. Though this involvement not only resulted in him stealing Granin's research,
I stole most of the basic ideas behind it. I'd hit a wall in my research at the time. Granin's ideas solved nearly all my problems.
There's nothing unusual about using somebody else's work to further your own research, is there?
As long as you cite it, yeah. But I wasn't in a position to do that. His research was classified at the highest level. Soviet research, no less.
So, you used it without telling anybody?
I wanted to show up my colleagues for once. The ones who never took me seriously.
but also taking Sokolov's Shagohod designs as well.
I actually took a cue from the Shagohod when I developed the pupa.
That hovercraft thing? You stole that one too.
And converting them into the Peace Sentinels, known as Pupa, Chrysalis, and Cocoon. All of them had different purposes, though Huey would soon learn that they were just the stepping stone to Hop Coldman's plan for his final creation, Peace Walker. Peace Walker was the first of Huey's directly lifted designs from Granite, being a bipedal AI weapon that could become quadrupedal if needed to, and was capable of simulating a nuclear attack anywhere in the world. Its purpose was to prove Hop Coldman's theory that man was not capable of mutually assured destruction. This hypothesis, though, was proven unmistakably wrong, and resulted in the destruction of Peace Walker, and from here, Huey would continue to work with MSF, a private military organization run by the former American hero Big Boss, who were the ones that took down Peace Walker, with him passing the blame of Peace Walker's own purpose onto Hot Coldman, and claiming that he was forced to build it under threat of blackmail, and that he would never create a tool of war like that ever again, which is a statement that would become all too familiar soon enough, as even after claiming that he didn't want to build weapons of war like Peace Walker, Huey suggests to Big Boss that they should recycle the AI weapons that he destroyed into a new creation, one that he would be more than happy to build himself. This resulted in the equally powerful AI weapon known as Metal Gear Zeke, a bipedal tank designed specifically for MSF. Its name was almost like Huey's own way of trying to make amends for his father's actions during World War II, while also secretly and subtly referencing Huey's possible alliance at the time, as the name came from the A6M-0 bomber, planes flown by the Japanese pilots during World War II in retaliation to American soldiers. And the name Zeke was chosen by the Americans in reference to the Zero and A6M Navy Type Zero carrier fighters, which were their full names. Meaning, in a way, its name is Metal Gear Zero, which references the fate of Zeke, as just like with Peace Walker, Zeke would soon find himself armed with a nuke, one which Miller would have equipped to it, but Huey was more than happy to comply with, which in turn caused Big Boss to question Huey's hypocrisy on this situation, because he criticized Coldman for doing the same thing with Peace Walker, which in turn Huey brushes it aside with flowery language stating that Big Boss was one of the good guys, essentially.
Say, I'm surprised you helped us arm Metal Gear with nukes.
What of it?
Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful and all, but you sure about this? They may be for MSF self-defense, but they're still nukes. It's essentially the same thing as Peace Walker, which you despised.
See, that's exactly it.
What is?
You don't hide your motives. You tell the truth. That's what makes you different from those CIA bastards.
Though Zeke was soon hijacked by Pacifica Ocean, a Cypher spy going under the name Paz to infiltrate Mother Base. She was here to threaten a nuclear strike if Big Boss did not join up again with Zero and the Patriots. But Big Boss was able to defeat Zeke and then launch Pacifica Ocean into the Pacifica Ocean. Huey was upset that the usage of his creations turned out like this, but found that Dr. Strangelove was willing to give him a chance if he could find a way to, quote-unquote, stand on his own, which in turn raised his spirits a bit in these sad times. A few weeks to a couple of months after the Peace Walker incident, Strangelove would leave MSF and leave Huey to orchestrate another one of his many plans. As MSF was busy with their everyday activities and running recon on pause if she had surfaced anywhere, and when it was discovered that she became a prisoner in Camp Omega, they decided to move and try to capture her, and this information caused chaos in MSF, allowing Huey to contact the UN to conduct an inspection of Mother Base. These plans were made by Huey and effectively tied the hands of MSF, forcing them into a tight spot where they had to comply with the inspection.
Send them an official letter of refusal. Say that we're a private organization and we've done nothing to attract this suspicion.
Because after you sent that letter, I told them. After careful reconsideration, we agree to your request. And frankly, we should be inspected. This is our chance. If they come and go without discovering the nuke, we can tell the world we're clean. Of course, it's risky, and we'll have to make sure everything's perfect, but it'll be worth it.
Huey, can they do an inspection without going through the Board of Governors?
We contacted the IAEA's admin branch, and they said there's no record of us being brought up at any of the board's meetings.
I'd say probably a preliminary inspection to determine whether we should be referred to the board. So it's bound to be a small inspection team, and they won't be here that long. Don't worry, leave everything to me. Besides, even if we said no, it would just be delaying the inevitable.
Kaz, our hands are tied now. Start getting the place ready.
Thanks, boss.
Don't get the wrong idea. You've set it up so that any more changes of heart will arouse suspicion, that's all.
The day of the inspection was the same day Big Boss touched down in Camp Omega and reclaimed Paz and Chico, with Chico being one who had left on his own to go and hunt down Paz on his own. Huey remained on base in charge of preparations for the inspection, and he did so by lowering Zeke into the bottom of the ocean to hide MSF's nuke from the UN. Along with this, essentially he left the base unarmed for the inspection to come off as a non-threatening military force. But ultimately, it resulted in Mother Base being essentially defenseless against the Trojan horse attack by Skullface and his XOF units disguised as the UN. And when the base fell, many bodies were uncovered, all except Huey Emmerich, leaving Miller to assume that in some way he was the man behind this attack. From here, Huey would go into hiding for the next decade, but he would resurface under the employment of XOF, reinforcing Miller's suspicion and Skullface all but confirming it later on.
I may dwell in the dark, but I refuse to be judged by your standards, traitor! I hope your friends give you what's coming to you.
And in the years while Big Boss was in a coma, he would start assembling his next big bipedal tank called Metal Gear Sahelanthropus, named after an ancient ape species whose discovery was covered up by the Patriots and XOF. Huey was likely giving it this name because of Granin, who saw Metal Gear as the stage between man and machine. So to name the most human-looking Metal Gear after an ancient ape that bridges the gap between ape and man was an attempt at Huey honoring the man who he built his whole career off of. Not to mention, he constructed it under the surveillance of XOF's employed Soviets, so it was a Soviet-built machine, much like Granin was a Soviet scientist. Sahelanthropus was Huey's most ambitious and destructive project yet. It was clear from the onset that it would be used in war, and during the process he would reunite with Strangelove, which would result in the two making love and eventually having a son named Hal. Along with this, while working with Skullface and XOF, he would be able to create mechanical prosthetic legs, which finally allowed Huey to walk on his own. But around the time of Sahelanthropus' finalization, news had begun to spread about Big Boss's awakening and the creation of Diamond Dogs, causing Huey to reach out in secret to try to reunite with the group, likely in a failed attempt to win over their trust. Though once captured and brought to the new Mother Base, he would become the subject of multiple interrogation, in which he would create excuse after excuse for his actions, and unsurprisingly, Huey would try to win favor from Diamond Dogs by constructing them yet another weapon of war. This time he created
A true battle gear! Cause I'm having deja vu here.
which was for all intents and purposes a huge step down from the Metal Gear technology, as it was essentially just a advanced tank. Though it did save Huey for the time being, but as time went on, Huey grew restless on Mother Base, constantly defending himself from question after question and creating stories to try to prove his innocence, or even passing the blame on to others.
Cypher forced me to do that research after the attack.
He even tried to cover his tracks by killing Skullface himself.
I did it! Revenge!
This was done in a way to prevent Skullface from being captured and then interrogated himself, along with being used in a meta-narrative sense to have Huey rob the player of being able to take out Skullface themselves. Though from this point on Mother Base, Huey's web of lies would begin to fall apart, as hole after hole began appearing in his stories. This all started with the recovery of the boss AI mammal pod from Huey's Soviet lab. Inside the pod was discovered the body of Dr. Strangelove, Huey's ex-lover, who was knowingly sealed inside to die after she sent away their son Hal from the lab. She did this because she didn't approve of Huey using Hal to test Sahelanthropus' human cockpit, which it should be noted that earlier, Huey had claimed to Diamond Dogs that Skullface never let him see his son in order to gain sympathy from them, and now we have evidence of him using his son, showing that he was lying about that earlier.
She had a child, didn't she? Your child. Where's the kid?
How should I know?
So there is a child.
I've never seen his face. They took it all. Even my child. I didn't even know he'd been born. I lost everything.
And his name?
We called him Hal, even though I never saw his face.
He then seemed to have killed her in a fit of rage, but made sure to do it in a way that he could chalk her death up as an accident later on. But he was sloppy in the way that he did it, and the pod was sealed in a way that showed obvious signs of intentional sabotage. Huey denied all these facts, all while the sound of Strangelove's voice rang out calling for him specifically to stop. Along with this, Huey began unauthorized repairs on Sahelanthropus on Mother Base, which allowed Eli in turn, with his Lord of the Flies unit, to steal the metal gear and escape. And beyond even that, Huey would also knowingly endanger the lives of everyone on Mother Base and the rest of the world when he began to modify the X-rays used on the soldiers, causing them to emit beta rays instead. These beta rays would forcibly mutate the vocal cord parasite intentionally, with plans of Huey taking this strand and selling it to Cypher for his rescue. These mutations resulted in a tragic quarantining of a portion of Mother Base, and ultimately resulted in the execution of everyone within that quarantine. All the while, Huey hypocritically called Boss a murderer for his actions, and tried to paint him as the villain in the situation. And these critiques of the boss's actions are directed at the player themselves as well, as they seemingly are designed to upset the player, calling them a monster for killing their own men, doubled down by the fact that there is a direct connection between Venom and the player themselves.
Shooting your own men. That's not the big boss out.
You as a person are growing to hate Huey the same way Venom likely is during the scene. Though what makes this incident so much more evil than just screwing over Diamond Dogs is the fact that if any of those soldiers had gotten out of the quarantine, the mutated vocal cord parasites could have been picked up by the birds around Mother Base, and then later being brought to land, creating a mutated vocal cord parasite global infection, though I doubt Huey stopped to think about that possibility. Eventually, all the evidence against him was gathered, and Huey was put into a makeshift court, which if not for Big Boss's involvement there, would have resulted in his death. But instead, he was exiled from Mother Base, placed on a life raft with food and water, but having to throw his mechanical legs into the ocean to prevent the raft from sinking, leaving him effectively with nothing, and likely gave him hydrophobia that his son claimed that he had later in his life. Though while he drifted slowly away from Mother Base, he smeared the names and members of Diamond Dogs, people he once called heroes he now referred to as murderers and monsters, refusing to take any responsibility for his actions at all. All of the people he directly or indirectly harmed, passing the blame yet again onto those he worked with. And when he finally reached land, he reunited with his son and began his new life, working again as a scientist for the United States, and later remarrying one of his colleagues, Julia Danziger, who had her own daughter named Emma. The two were seemingly happy together until Huey learned that Julia had been sleeping around with his son, Hal. And in the same fit of rage that caused him to kill Strangelove, Huey grabbed Julia's daughter and attempted to drown himself along with her in their family pool. Or at least this is how Otacon chooses to label the story. It's very likely that Huey might have attempted to kill Julia's daughter as revenge, though failed himself and fell in the pool with her. Though luckily enough, Emma was able to survive this incident, but was severely traumatized by it, where Huey met his end there, drowning in the pool the pathetic loser that he was, making Ocelot's statement of his past actions finally catching up to him ring true.
One day he'll see through the lies he's built up, realize what kind of man he really is. Goes around, comes around. Can't run from yourself
And it should be known that him dying in this way has been known about since Metal Gear Solid 2, and the extra details about him intentionally dragging down Emma with him has been known about since Metal Gear Solid 4, meaning that most people knew Huey would become a scumbag ever since they met him in Peace Walker, and this aspect of him can be seen all throughout his character, starting first with the fact that Huey is actually somewhat of a hack scientist. Everything he has created is more or less stolen from someone else's work, be it the AI pods from Strangelove, or the Metal Gear from Granin. Huey isn't the genius like his father was, or even like his son would become. Beyond that, he was a blatant hypocrite from the get-go, which is signs of his untrustworthiness. And I mean, can you even trust a guy who mocks another man for believing in Santa?
What I do know is that NORAD tracks Santa Claus on its radar.
Nice one. I didn't know you were a comedian, too.
Huh? No, I'm serious. It's true, NORAD tracks his... Listen to me. Every December they set up a hotline and...
What an asshole. Huey is someone who you could argue was put into a tough position early on, but as time went on it became more and more clear that he had lost all of his morals. Because if he was truly forced to create these weapons of mass destruction like he claims, it wouldn't make sense for him to later on suggest that they create more of them. Huey seems somewhat obsessed with making his own place in the history of the world like his father was. He wanted the recognition for his accomplishments, no matter how much they were built off the backbones of those who actually created them. And for all of his trouble, his backstabbing and bad-mouthing, the weapons of death he created, he is most remembered for the trauma that he inflicted on his family. A footnote in Hal's life that pushed him to become the man that he is now, the one who actually made a difference in the world. Huey was a pathetic bastard built up perfectly throughout the whole of the Metal Gear Solid series and is a great example of a character designed to be hated by the player. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like it in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MediNotTheBadGuy. And if you want to stick it to Huey yourself, you can do so by buying a copy of Shimonetta, A Boring World Where the Concept of Dirty Jokes Doesn't Exist at buyshimonetta.com.